with over 500 employees throughout the United States. In 2015, Peter embarked on an 18-month, 85-country business investigation to understand how to apply his vision of serving and elevating humanity at the largest possible scale. He's the founder of the Cristo Rey Tampa Salesian High School, which now serves over 175 low-income students. He is currently building multiple tech businesses and has 9 patents pending. A member of Legatus and Tiger 21, he has written for numerous publications, including Forbes, Morning Consult, The American Mind, and The Wall Street Journal. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Peter Rex to the podium.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. Hillsdale is actually my favorite college in the entire world. But you know, I've never even been here before. This is my first time. And it gets worse. I've never even read what the curriculum is. I don't know what they're learning. I've never met a professor before. So you might wonder, how could it be my favorite college? Well, it's because I've met some of the grads from here. And they've impressed me more than other grads from other universities, whether it was some of my peers at Georgetown or Harvard Law School later, or throughout my business career, we've hired over 100. I've hired myself screening people over 100 at least. The students are, the alumni as they graduate are free-thinking, they're independent-minded, and they are broadly learned, which I think is the product that should be produced, should come out of a good education from university, from college. So, congratulations to you guys. Me being here is a little bit of irony in it, because as an entrepreneur, I'm typically, like a lot of successful entrepreneurs, a little crazy. Not the best rule follower. As I mentioned to Elizabeth from Breitbart at dinner, she was worried about her kid had some trouble with Montessori school, couldn't follow the rules. I said, don't worry about it. I was kicked out of Montessori school. So, and, all the way up, through Harvard Law School, I had problems with, not attending classes. Elizabeth Warren, actually, I was in one of her classes, had officially failed me, one of the only 2 students she ever failed in her career. But it's even better because then I fought back to take the exam and I ended up passing anyways. So, just like Trump might fight back and end up as president, who knows? We'll see. But to kind of bring it to why I'm here, first reason why I'm here, there's really 2 reasons. First is it's out of self-interest. I see that Hillsdale is a great university, great college. I've seen some of the produce, some of the fruit from the tree, so I know the tree must be great. So I want to build a network with our company and with Hillsdale, a pipeline for future people that could work in our company, and also be connected with the alumni for information advantages, understanding things. These are thoughtful people, fiercely independent thinkers, and those are the types of people I want to get to know and be friends with into the future. The second reason why I'm here is because of the seriousness of big tech and its danger that it poses to us and to a free society. And I wanted to convey my understanding of how it works and how it's sort of tied together and propose some solutions. So let me jump right into things here. I've got a bit of a packed talk here, so I'm going to try to hammer through, so keep up with me here. My topic is the political and cultural conformity of big tech. I want to give you a quick overview of what I'm going to talk about. First, I'm going to tell you where this conformity comes from. There are 4 essential interconnected elements. We'll talk about the people who run tech, who they are, where they're from, what they think. Then I'm going to describe the consequences of their worldview. There are a few big ones. Finally, we're going to look at how to break down the homogeneous conformity of big tech leadership, which is the key to getting us out of this mess and creating a world where tech is helping instead of hindering human flourishing. Tech has huge potential for future progress and human advancement, but now it's primarily focused on objectifying customers and extracting value from the masses, with the benefits increasingly flowing to a fewer and fewer small elite group. Tech offers powerful new avenues to share knowledge and enrich culture, but today it's rapidly eroding the cultural norms and eternal truths on which our civilization stands. Faith, family, freedom. Tech is undermining it all. And of course, tech has the power to give more people a voice. But as we've seen in just the past week, tech is actually taking people's voices away. It's censoring regular citizens and acting like the gatekeeper of truth. It also censors news outlets and even the President of the United States. It's acting like it knows what is best for us to hear and to understand, and it's trying to direct us as to what we can think is true or false, even though we have not even voted for them or elected them. There's no question that technology has made us materially better off, all of us, no exceptions. But there's so much more to the story. A lot of the most cutting-edge tech is now in the hands of a radicalized minority that is enriching itself by feeding off of our vices, while leaving the rest of society morally and culturally bankrupt. Today's tech leadership sucks. Period. Mainly because they're intolerant. Their intolerance manifests itself in oppressive cultural and political conformity. Big tech is imposing a single worldview on the rest of us, leading us to a full-blown crisis, culturally, politically, and economically. The good news, though, is we can do something about all of this. We can transform tech to the betterment of our country, our economy, and our world. Before we dig in, I want to make one thing clear. While conformity is real in the tech industry, conformity in itself isn't bad per se. Conformity can be a good thing. Look at the Amish. They're a bit weird, like myself. They prefer a horse and buggy. I prefer a Tesla Roadster. Some like the charm, some like the speed. What's key is that the Amish and I tolerate those who are different. There's plenty of good conformity elsewhere, too. I'm a Catholic. We have our own version. There's even a flavor of conformity here at Hillsdale, I would imagine. All of that's fine because it comes from a good place and it tolerates the other. And even in the case of Christianity, mandates to love the other. But the conformity in big tech does not give toleration for the other, the one who disagrees with their worldview. Their ideology is an intolerant ideology that's hostile to nonconformists. Ultimately, their ideology leads to cultural and political subjugation, to forcing others to conform. That subjugation is in its early stages, but it's gaining steam fast. The rottenness of big tech has been obvious to anyone who has been paying attention. But now, because of the election, it's become obvious even to those who were not paying attention. Big tech has flexed its muscles before the world like never before, and most people are now realizing that we have a problem. Let's turn to where this crisis came from. Tech conformity exists for 4 interconnected reasons. The first, tech leaders and workers mostly come from a tiny handful of universities. That already limits the range of views and experiences, creating a very small group of people with largely similar views and training. Second, these schools indoctrinate students and transmit a worldview opposed to nonconformist thinking. They're especially hostile to Judeo-Christian ideas and the critical thinking it spurs. Third, tech is mostly located in two radicalized urban centers, Seattle and San Francisco. The local culture reinforces what was indoctrinated at the universities. The politics and the culture constantly encourage the same things, and more importantly, discourage opposing viewpoints. As more tech people trained to be intolerant descend on these two areas, the worse it gets. Fourth, and finally, tech is tremendously profitable. Without this extraordinary profitability, the situation would not exist. The tech industry's growth and riches, in turn, generate massive demand for more of the same type of talent, which comes from the same universities and ends up in the same two locations. Combine these four things and you get a self-perpetuating cycle of highly compensating lemmings that want to impose their views on the rest of us. You can see this reality with your own eyes. For my part, I started to see it when I began to get my hands dirty in the tech world. I've been in business for well over a decade. I got started in my investment, real estate, and operations in 2005. I powered through the last economic crash, getting my face kicked in, yet survived to tell the story and keep building. About 6 years ago, I began to see that technology had the potential to transform real estate and pretty much every industry. I wanted to drive that transformation. In 2016, I moved to San Francisco and jumped headfirst into every aspect of technology. The way I saw it was that if I wanted to learn the most about tech, I needed to be in the center of it all to understand it from within. I love San Francisco. The city and the people are generally wonderful. The natural beauty is also wonderful, and I love the restaurants, etc. There's so much in San Francisco and Silicon Valley that's right, but there's an awful lot that's gone wrong and has gotten worse in the past few years. From the moment I arrived in the Bay Area, I sensed an oppressive weight of an intolerant ideology. It seemed like everyone thought the same way about everything. And most alarmingly, on things that matter most, there were basically no disagreements. The tech elite had one view of culture, one view of politics, one view of humanity, and one view of society. They all felt the same way about how it should look, how it should work, and how they should take the lead in reshaping it. When I was recruiting, I realized that only with great diligence could I find people who were independent-minded, and in most cases, they were sort of hiding, having realized their personal views had the potential of hindering their professional advancement. After 2 years in San Francisco, I left. I realized that it wasn't a prudent idea to build a massive, long-term institution in a place where free-thinking people were so hard to find. I also realized I had a large gap in my understanding of the game. I was missing a grasp of the other tech power, Seattle. That's where you have Amazon and Microsoft, and they do things very differently. I was hopeful that in the Pacific Northwest, I might find a place where I could set up the foundation of my companies. So I headed north to Seattle with my wife and 2 kids. Like San Francisco, the Seattle area was amazing in so many ways. Great friendships, great outdoors, great times for business. But we ran into the exact same cultural challenges. In terms of tech, it had a massive tech talent pool, but the ocean surrounding it was intellectually, culturally, politically, and morally one-sided, and therefore stifling for free thinkers, just like San Francisco. Tech is the most innovative field in the world, but it's now filled with some of the world's most insular leadership. It's the most dynamic part of the economy, but it's now stagnant in terms of the views and values of its workforce. We call it big tech, and that's true to an extent. Big companies, big impact, big markets, big profits. It has all that and more, but in a broader sense, and in a more meaningful sense, big tech is small. It is small-minded and small-hearted. It even has a small vision for what's possible for humanity. So what explains this? How did the vast majority of the tech industry become controlled by a cultural and political cabal, one that's determined to impose its worldview and is bent on censoring free citizens and even the leader of the free world? It's not a secret. What started with indoctrination at the college has continued and worsened on the corporate campus. Before I explain how this happened, I want to explain how I came to realize something. I trace it back to a trip in 2015. I was putting together my plans to launch a massive venture when I realized I lacked a truly global understanding of the world, which was necessary. Additionally, I wanted to see what worked, what didn't, and what kind of global opportunities were out there. I traveled to 85 countries in 18 months and took over 1,000 business meetings with leaders across the globe. Each country was fascinating in its own way, but I noticed a common thread in communist or formerly communist countries. I kept asking myself, how did these regimes maintain such an evil ideology and control people so effectively for so long? What made it possible for them to subordinate human freedom and human dignity to the state for decades? A big part of the answer was education, or rather the emphasis on technical education and the intentional lack of liberal arts education. You see, communist countries put a premium on STEM education: science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Let's be clear, these are important focuses. They're important to economic and technological progress. But on their own, they're not enough. They're all about training how to do something rather than how to think. You only get to the why when you study ethics, religion, literature, history, politics, and philosophy. Communist regimes intentionally never emphasized these disciplines, and they still don't. Whether it was the Soviet Union in the 1980s or communism today, those regimes don't want anyone to think critically about social, political, and moral issues. The rulers don't want people to ask tough questions because then the people might start to find unacceptable answers. So the rulers push people into fields that would most benefit the state. They want people who can build utilitarian and high-level military tech like nukes, tanks, fighter jets, and hacking tools, but not discuss high-level ideas like truth and beauty. They want minions who can build stuff, but they definitely do not want free-thinking people who can critically question why and for what purpose, or is this the right way or wrong way to do things. They want people who take orders, not free citizens. What they haven't realized is that by holding their own people down, communist regimes sow the seeds of their own destruction. A society that destroys its people's moral and historical sense will ultimately destroy itself because it's destroying its own soul. That's one of the most important realizations I had when I was traveling. Then, as soon as I got home to the West Coast, it hit me. I saw an analogous problem here. Our tech leaders are the product of a similar system at universities. They are indoctrinated and trained to execute well technically, but not trained to think as free persons. Now, of course, there are differences between American higher education and communist education. Our university system isn't as dehumanizing, all-encompassing, or wholly directed by the government. But our best and brightest students still go through a kind of ideological indoctrination, one that's increasingly hostile to free thought. Specifically, they're being taught that Western civilization is the enemy, that our ideals are inherently evil. The education these students are getting claims to be progressive, but it's actually regressive. The result is the loss of learning that enriches the soul, enlightens the mind, and teaches critical thinking. Instead of liberal arts, we have the opposite, ideologically driven grievance training and STEM education. These schools no longer educate to help create free persons who are able to contribute to a vibrant society. Instead, they turn out indoctrinated worker bees, able to technically execute their jobs while also advancing the party line. The tech talent pipeline draws straight from this system. In fact, big tech and its favorite universities have created a feedback loop. They rely on each other for success. The tech companies turn to schools like Stanford and Berkeley for talent, because the best STEM talent is indeed there. And the schools themselves keep tailoring their curricula to give the tech companies what they want, helping their students find lucrative careers. Making things even more uniform, company leadership is biased against hiring conservatives, libertarians, religious people, or other non-conforming types from these universities, thus creating an even more homogeneous group of tech employees. The graduates of these universities eventually move into communities like Silicon Valley, where they face an even stronger pressure to conform and develop an even stronger dislike for those who do not conform. The media exacerbates it. They spew the same message as the universities. The result is a resounding chorus and a constant reinforcement of the same ideas. Each new crop of students is thus less likely than the last to think for themselves. The college education puts on the mental blinders, and then the broader community makes sure they never come off. The gasoline fueling this fire is the immense profitability of tech. The huge amounts of money being made is drawing people into the technology university complex. The profits fund the multiplication of these intolerant tech leaders who control the most dynamic and powerful industry. For too many in tech, the mind and the soul are only half formed, and the missing half is the most important. Far from creating superhumans, they're still stuck in the cave. Their education and worldview doesn't touch the soul or talk to the ultimate things like life, death, love, and happiness. It doesn't elevate our eyes in understanding. They're driving the future, but they don't know the past or the principles that brought us to where we are right now. Let's recap. Big tech is now rotten with intolerance, which manifests itself in a homogeneous conformity. It's a conformity of non-thought on issues that demand to be thought through, like, say, the presidential election and the integrity of the ballot box. But I digress. Now let's turn to the consequences. There are big ones, and they're bad for humanity. The first is censorship. Big tech isn't content to stay in its own community and just police its own thought. Their intolerance demands more. So the leaders and employees of these companies are driven to impose conformity on the rest of us. Major tech companies are now muzzling opposing thinkers and blocking competing thoughts from reaching the working class and the wider society. They think they have it all figured out, so there's no need for the rest of us to think at all. Big tech is able to do this because in many cases it has monopoly power, especially in social media. Many tech companies have massive reach, and the more money they make, the further that reach can extend. This gives them a historically unprecedented chance to manipulate the way billions of people think, and they don't seem to be hesitating to do so. A huge problem is that big tech lacks accountability. Some of the world's biggest companies have abused their extraordinarily powerful positions, and there are literally no consequences. That is wrong, and this is dangerous. The leadership of these companies has been trained to think they're better and smarter than the rest of us and beyond accountability. And their business success only validates that in their minds. They have reached the summit. Now they must hand down the tablets to the common people below. So what's on their tablets? You may be shocked to learn they look nothing like what came down from Mount Sinai. Tech leaders have no ethical or philosophical formation or mooring, so they inevitably attach themselves to every new movement that comes along. They are proof that Chesterton was right when he reportedly said, "When men stop believing in God, they don't believe in nothing, they believe in anything." Abortion, check. Gender fluidity, check. Destroying the traditions and heroes of our ancestors, check. The list is always changing, growing, morphing. What they believed yesterday may be anathema tomorrow. For them, there are no timeless principles, just the social justice fads. Naturally, the principles behind a flourishing society have no place in their worldview. The Judeo-Christian traditions speak of eternal and unchanging truths on which happiness depends. Those traditions make sweeping claims about how humanity should live, which is why, for big tech, they must be swept away. Hence, the effort to extend conformity as far as possible. The push for conformity is everywhere, politically and culturally. Big tech is spending millions of dollars across the country to defeat candidates who have any kind of Judeo-Christian views. This past election was proof. Tech is also backing radical groups that want to fundamentally shatter the foundations of a free society. The current tech mindset is perfectly fine with tearing down and rebuilding their world over our ruins. But the biggest way tech imposes conformity with their worldview is through its platforms. For instance, tech companies have little issue blocking videos that run counter to their worldview. Similarly, tech companies like to fact-check things that cut against their own interpretations. They also set standards that limit conversation and implicitly cast anyone who's not a moral, political, or cultural extremist in their same vein as a bigot. And of course, tech enforces their worldview through outright censorship. Last week, they censored many for simply asking questions about the integrity of the ballot box. And they repeatedly do the same thing to the president. Even if you disagree with the dissenter, and even if you think certain dissenting people are over the line, it's not okay to muzzle voices, especially at such an important time. If tech is fine censoring the most powerful government leaders, then imagine how quickly the rest of us can be silenced. It's worth dwelling a bit on the censorship of the President of the United States. It crystallizes just how intolerant the tech elite are and how powerful they have become. They don't trust the public to discern what's true and false. Only the tech elite can do that. And it's not just Trump voters who get treated that way. To the tech mind trained in those bastions of intolerance, there are plenty of inferior human beings who should be shielded from confusion and pointed in the right direction. Of course, they ignore that finding the truth requires a free and open debate. Truth demands it. The people as a whole are actually ingenious and much smarter than the tech elite, especially when it comes to common sense. People will discern the truth if given the chance, but big tech is refusing to give them that chance. The environment is bad, and it will get worse before the tide turns. The tech industry is only getting more monolithic in viewpoint and aggressive in pushing it. The rising generation of tech leaders is even more intolerant and steeped in anti-thought than current tech leaders. As they gain power, they will use it. They have every intention of achieving their brave new world. If they can bring you along, if they can't bring you along, they will gladly leave you behind. Earlier, I said that tech's so-called progressive views are fundamentally regressive. I meant that in a moral sense. Their views are undermining, not advancing human freedom and human flourishing. But there's another way that tech conformity is backwards. Big tech's intolerance is holding back true technological progress. At first, this may sound counterintuitive. Thanks to tech, we have smartphones, laptops, the cloud, high-speed internet, and the ability to instantly communicate all over the world. Tech has made our lives better and easier in so many ways. But it's also true that tech has not empowered most people. Yes, most people have more products. But tech, as of recently, has not made most people more productive. Instead, big tech is building tools and systems and platforms that enrich the few while exploiting the many. On the whole, tech has become increasingly guilty of consumerizing rather than empowering. The lack of belief in people also has a huge impact on how you build and run a company. If you think of yourself as superior to the masses, then you're not going to design something that helps the masses. You'll prioritize enriching yourself even at the expense of people. If you see yourself as somehow better, then it's not so bad to distract, misdirect, and dehumanize those who are inferior so long as you yourself benefit. After all, your gain is more important than theirs because you are more important. More and more people are starting to realize that something's wrong. People are angry. A big part of the reason is they know that tech isn't working for them. They see the wealth and power flowing to the West Coast, but they don't see corresponding benefits flowing their way. They see tech leaders living large while looking down on the rest. They're starting to see that they're being exploited to enrich people who don't even believe in them. No wonder there's a backlash against big tech. No wonder populism is rising on the left and right. Tech is not fulfilling its promise, which is to help us all unleash our true potential. We were told that it would deliver for us a new and better age. It still can, while generating returns on a global scale. But that truth is now considered tiring for most of society, and they are sick of waiting. Now, we've covered the problem, which, if you recall, has 4 parts. Most of the tech elite come from the same universities. Those universities indoctrinate against truth and free thinking and encourage intolerance, resulting in increased conformity. The tech centers in Seattle and San Francisco reinforce that conformity. And tech's profitability is the gasoline that feeds the fire, creating a massive demand for more tech jobs, which drives that cycle faster. We've also covered some of the consequences. An empowered, smug elite with no accountability that's fiercely intolerant of opposing viewpoints is using its massive market power to dehumanize, censor, manipulate, and ultimately control people at scale. Now let's talk about the solution. There is a solution. Good will always triumph over evil. And it is in our darkest hour that the dawn begins. We are at that dawn now. But I want to be clear that enacting a solution won't be easy. The path forward is a long one. It'll take years, likely decades. Almost all true solutions to big human problems take at least a decade to implement and a lot of fighting to overcome. So where do we start? Well, politics is a rearguard action. It's important, but it's a last-ditch attempt to defend our freedoms, a throwing up of walls to keep out the incoming rush of waters. These efforts are necessary, but will not save us in the long run. Politicians and bureaucrats, by our own systems design, are unable to strategically attack and implement the solutions necessary. Many politicians right now are rightfully focused on trust-busting and free speech protections. But that's not sufficient. They're focused on the symptoms instead of the disease. You can break up a tech company into 50 smaller ones, but each one is still going to be run by people who are hostile to the principles of human dignity and flourishing. We need to look elsewhere. One place to focus is training people to think critically. Bad schooling got us into this mess in the first place, but empowered education can help get us out. We let communists, socialists, and nihilists train an entire generation of students, and now those students have been put in charge of the industry of the future. This cannot be repeated. A better education would teach the truth. It would ground every learner, even those studying STEM, in the lessons of history and philosophy and literature. They would encounter the world and human nature as they are, not the way some ideologue wants them to be. An education like that breeds a kind of humility about our own limitations and about the limitations of human action and perfectibility. It opens us up, knowing our own limitations, to listen to opposing views, which is the only way to achieve the truth. Ultimately, we need an education system that properly orients us to each other and to our Creator. But education isn't enough either, not nearly enough. We also need to focus on entrepreneurship. We need people of action, innovators, engineers, and investors who will do what current tech leaders won't do, perhaps, or can't do. We need them to believe in people and build technology based on that belief. This is one of the greatest opportunities in the world, and it's where I'm focusing my energy and resources. Tech was never destined to take this divisive, dehumanizing road. It went in that direction only somewhat recently. Historically, many of the great software companies followed a more humane approach. They created general-purpose applications for a broader user base, like Microsoft's Office suite. And at Apple, Steve Jobs famously wanted to help build products so simple that a child could intuitively use them. He developed some of the finest hardware and software products in the world. Tech leaders have lost that spirit and sensibility, but it can be found again. If that happens, the economic upside will be massive. Tech has the power to free people from drudgery and leverage our God-given creative abilities. Instead of spawning addicts, we can spur positive and productive action. Instead of pushing people toward obsolescence, we can unlock opportunity. Instead of distracting users, we can help workers to focus and be more productive. I'm convinced we haven't even scratched the surface of what is possible. We will find ideas and innovations that are even more lucrative, beneficial, and transformative than the ones we've found so far. Instead of tearing the country apart, we could use tech to bring the country together. In short, we could use technology's enormous potential and reach a future better than many have imagined. To conclude, get a little drink. To conclude, there are three things we need to do to break the stronghold of the current intolerant big tech leaders. One, train people to think critically and encourage diversity of thought. A diversity of thought is essential to innovation and progress. Conformity stifles that, so we need to combat it. Tech doesn't need any more non-thinking ideologues. We need people who are trained to critically think, ask tough questions, and find answers. Just to be clear, I don't think that training people to think should only or even mainly happen at universities. We need a multi-pronged approach that includes K through 12, the workplace, and efforts at the community level. But colleges and universities do play a part. I hope that more of higher education follows Hillsdale's lead and empowers students to think. That would do a lot of good for tech and society as a whole. Two, we need to invest in free-thinking tech entrepreneurs, especially Judeo-Christian types who are poised for leadership. They are the future tech leaders that we need to win. The task of finding and funding these future innovators is the responsibility of enlightened investors, the ones who are willing to consider the common good and want to make their money alongside people they believe in. Company leaders also have a responsibility to select and empower people who are grounded in liberal arts, capable of critical analysis, and have a strong enough character to be contrarian. That's the kind of person who will develop tech products and platforms that dramatically improve life, and who will ultimately promote timeless principles. The third and final thing we need to do is build an alternative tech power structure. Specifically, we need to do so outside of Silicon Valley and Seattle. My view is that the next biggest tech opportunities are best built in places where the soil is rich with people who are looking for ways to serve people and not master them. A place where diversity of thought, Judeo-Christian values, and human flourishing is being cultivated. And I'm putting my money where my mouth is. I already told you that I moved to San Francisco. What I didn't tell you is that we recently moved to Seattle as well. It happened this past summer. We made this decision for many reasons, but foremost was the need to have our company built on a foundation that we have confidence in for the next 30 years. So we left. Our company headquarters is now in the strongly free state of Texas. I don't have my gun on me, so you guys are fine. But I do have some at home now that I'm in Texas. I had to do that, you know. Ultimately, I have great hope in the future. We will take leadership from big tech. We will empower new, independent-minded, and humane leaders. We will promote a worldview and ideology far more attractive and grounded in the truth. Big tech doesn't stand a chance. They can only speak to computers. We can speak to the soul. Thank you. Now, can we do that 9 times more than normal, like the thing? Thanks, guys. Man, I haven't written stuff since back in law school. It's pretty tiring. Nah, it's an important topic, and I figured I had some things to say, and I've seen a lot of things, so important to communicate it with you. But I don't know what the agenda is, but if there's any questions, stuff like that. We've got a beautiful young man over here.
Yep, you can make
That's
your
you.
way to the microphones if you have a question.
Oh, okay.
I was going to ask the international dimension of what you speak. Most of your comments were very U.S. focused, yet these big tech companies operate, I mean, you know, many more customers outside the U.S. than in the U.S. And when you talk about the gigantic leap of a couple thousand miles, why not Bangalore? Why not Western Europe? Why not South America? Why not? But, and I do note that you've spoken very positively of Jack Ma and Alibaba. So do you think the Chinese are the model that it's better?
I think you know my answer to that one. No. No, very good question, though. No, I've been to all those places, Bangalore, I've been to Hyderabad. I mean, when I went to these countries, I also went to the cities, the major cities. So I went to about 9 cities in India, about 10 or 11 or 12 or something in China. I try not to insult specific countries too much because some people get offended if they're from there, you know, so. But it was good to leave China when I did. Felt great. Now, Jack Ma is kind of an exception to the rule. And in fact, you know, Jack Ma is from an area called Hangzhou. Hangzhou was a territory that was received missionaries in about the 1500s and 1600s, Jesuit missionaries and later on other missionaries. And it's interesting because the way he speaks sometimes has very, you know, Judeo-Christian themes to it. So there might be something to that. Now, later on, you know, hundreds of years later, they kicked out the missionaries and the Christians. But there could be some of that in that soil in Hangzhou where Alibaba sprouted out of. And Alibaba and Jack Ma really had conflict with them. But let me jump into the question, though. I divert a lot and segue. But yeah, so the reason why I located in Texas is because, look, I'm still long America. You know, I know we've got a lot of problems. This election is a mess. You know, I would like to put myself forward as the President of the United States instead of Biden or Trump if anybody wants to vote for me now. It's a little late. But yeah, it's a mess. But I think it's really exposing a lot of things for people, so it's kind of a good thing. But I still am long America. And America is the center of the world, and we are the most powerful country, probably in history. We are the most powerful country in history because we can reach, given technology and other things, everywhere and every person throughout the world, right? Even North Korea nowadays, right? So and the rest of the world all watches us and all uses our tech products. And the leading technologists are in Seattle and San Francisco. There are some good leaders in China and other things, and China's done very well in tech, but it's kind of within their enclosed system that they're doing well. They haven't been able to move their tech outside of there, with the exception of TikTok now is doing pretty well. But they haven't had much success in moving their technologies outside of the enclosed system of China. Now, the Chinese have great engineers because they focus on STEM, which I touched on here. Communist countries focus on that so heavily, so they have some of the best engineers come out of China and Russia. Now, the Chinese tend to hold their engineers because they don't move out as much. But the best of the best talent, when they can, they end up in this country. And Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Facebook, these guys have so much clout, so much power that they're able to set up almost, quasi-governmental relationships with these countries to get some of the people into our country on temporary visas, or even they have something just north of the border in Canada that's a huge campus for Microsoft, or they're in Vancouver working, but they're really working for Amazon and Microsoft. So we really are, from this very small area, out of tech in San Francisco and Seattle, having the big, massive impact, and it's all coming from there. Now, where to set up a headquarters, why Texas? Well, I kind of explained that. I think that the culture is very strong, very freedom-loving, very defensive of their own values, and they love the things I love, which is God, family, business. Those are the three top things, right? And they love all that stuff, and it's in their culture. So, and it's central to the country, so it's got a lot of other things. And if I was to set up in Bangalore, I mean, India's got its own problems. I mean, we think we got problems in this country. Yes, relatively speaking, maybe to the last 10 years or whatever, we've got problems, or 20 years. But if you go to India and you go to other places, I mean, these places are, have a lot of significant political problems. Even moving between one state to another has serious problems within India. It's not quite so much of it's not like China where it's just like one enclosed single system. It's almost like different countries within India. But I'm getting kind of off on a different segue. But that's why I chose here. And internationally, there's not even really a second. If I had to pick a second place, it would be something like Berlin. Berlin has a great ecosystem of talent, very centrally located now for Europe. Russia is not as bad as people say it is. I've been throughout Russia, a lot more free nowadays. And people, they've suffered and come through communism, and they're on the other end of that. And there's actually a resurgence of Christianity there. Right in Moscow's, Red Square, you've got a cross, you've got like an old monk, the one who brought Christianity there, a huge statue of him too. So that's all in the last 5-10 years or so. So the Orthodox Christians are coming back and resurging there. So anyways, I'm kind of all over the place here, but that kind of gets to why I stay. So the first thing I was going to stay in America was the big picture question. And then within America, we decided, okay, where within America? We picked Texas. Where within Texas? We picked Austin. Austin's pretty liberal, but I'm okay with seeing different sides of the views, and I like to have that. And I actually don't consider myself necessarily a conservative. I consider myself someone who seeks the truth. And oftentimes I'm labeled as a conservative throughout college and law school, but I just don't even take a label. I said whatever, because I don't like to think from a label. I like to think from a standpoint of what is the truth and then trying to find that. So, too long of an answer, sorry. But thank you, though. That was a good question.
Well, thank you for speaking with us. It's good to hear from a fellow Texan. I'm from the Houston area. My question is...
I'm a Texan now already. Wow, thank you. I appreciate that.
Regarding...
my fourth kid will be born soon, and that'll be the first Texan in the family. So,
well, congratulations.
Thanks.
Regarding streaming services and social media specifically, how can we respond to the epidemics of distraction and isolation that we see when you engage with those platforms?
Yeah. It's tough. I mean, I think first is to recognize our own human weakness that they're playing to our vices. And, if we were perfectly virtuous, then we would just be like, oh, I'm not gonna take a look at this distracting text or whatever it might be, right? I'll tell you what I do anyways, is I put my phone very far away from me. I'll put it in the basement or something. Or if I'm at work, I'll put it in a random spot. I often forget where it is. So I told my assistant, which you'll see right now, to get a bright covered case because I always forget where it is so I can spot it. But I'll just put it off and leave it somewhere, And I focus on the work at hand. In the morning, with my family, I'll just not have a phone with me, and we'll just focus on family time for an hour or so. That way we get that in up front. When I'm praying, same thing. I just don't have it around me because it's tempting, and we're human, so it's better to just recognize. It's kind of like, if I'm a single guy, I'm not going to go live right next to, like a strip club or something crazy, or be around that, right? So, I mean, we know how guys are, right? Not like me, I was never like that, but other guys. But I don't know if that answers your question there. Yeah, so I think getting back to kind of recognizing the humility, your own weakness, then building around that. The other thing is the isolation's a big problem, man. A lot of people are depressed. There's like, I think 1/3 are clinically depressed now, and another thing I saw recently, but maybe that was a fake poll. But anyways, that was probably not a fake poll because there's no incentive to create a fake poll, so it's probably true, right? And that's where, I mean, we've got to get back to, I would say, coming back to basics of like getting together for fellowships, getting together for book clubs. And people are meant to be together, Even our immune systems fire off much better when we're together. And the best protection even against certain viruses is having a strong immune system. There's millions of viruses every day you come across, right? So I'm not an expert in this, so I shouldn't even talk about it. But the point is, we need to keep healthy, man. The biggest risk is we don't live now, We're going to be like kind of isolated, atomatized by technology. And then further, this kind of isolating ourselves from some of the fear that's kind of driving people. So.
Okay. Questions to the speaker's end. Questions to the speaker's left.
Oh, okay. It's very impartial. I like this.
I was going to ask about what your views are on some European countries and their tactics for tackling these social media big companies, like having users be given the option by law to have those companies purge their data, like Facebook's data on them and their ad tracking, or some of the other countries in Europe, like Finland with their right to the internet, but they're also in the EU working on tackling big tech giants' control over social media.
Yeah, that was a little muzzled how you're saying that. Could you say it one more time? Or maybe the person who's receiving can repeat it, but it's kind of a complex question. But yeah, go ahead.
What are your views on the European nations and their methods of tackling social media tech giants?
Trying to regulate it?
Trying to regulate them and make it by law so citizens can ask for their data to be purged from sites such as Facebook or Twitter?
Yeah. So what's my views on basically regulating big tech? How do we go about that? I mean, look, in general, I have a very strong libertarian bent to me. Avoiding labels, so that's probably true. I hate rules. I hate the government. I mean, I love it, but whatever. But I don't like following people telling me what to do. That's another good thing about being in Texas, right? Less of that. So Seattle, they were like telling you what to do about stuff. Right? San Francisco, even worse. They try to tell you you can't do a lot of things. It's pretty annoying. But that being said, look, we also need to protect free speech, right? So there's kind of like, you've got, yes, I want less regulations. Everybody does, right? And generally, government's not good at coming up with good regulations. But, on the other hand, we need to maintain free speech. And we can see that the free society is actually at risk if we don't do so. So we've got to now, I think, do something. We've got to put in some regulations. Now, I don't know the specific laws in Europe and, Finland, which is part of Europe, I guess, a little Scandinavia. But I would say that, I can't speak to them honestly, and in general, I've tried to avoid law as much as I can since I got out of law school, and that was like 10 years ago. So I'm kind of I don't even know the specific thing about it, so I can't speak to it. But generally, I would say the broader theme would be that we're going to have to regulate them, and that's it. There's no other way around it because we got to protect a free society.
Thank you so much for your talk, Peter. I really appreciate it, and I also agree with many of your points, especially that there's a huge problem with kind of this overflow coming out of progressive schools, moving into big tech.
Do you agree with all my points or just many?
All of them so far.
Thank you.
But
Okay.
I will venture one more. I do think that there is some fault with some of the conservative schools like Hillsdale, and that when you actually look at our graduating classes, for some reason, a very, very small minority of students actually go into tech. The majority go into politics, econ, law, which are all great professions, but for some reason, not many are going into tech. So I guess I have two questions for you. Why do you think there is kind of a lack of students that have been educated in the liberal arts that are going into tech, and what can you do to try to promote students that have been educated in the liberal arts to pursue tech instead of politics or law?
Yeah, so to rephrase that so everybody gets that is basically, what can I say to students that are, want to have a positive impact in the world? to, consider that DC is not the only option, right, to have this impact. What I'd say is they've got to, and the choice is an obvious initial on its surface choices. I want to have an impact, I'm going to go to DC. In fact, when I started in college, I was at Ave Maria College in Michigan. And I spent 2 years there. And I ended up transferring to Georgetown because some of the influence from the professors, they had recommended I might need to get a brand name or something to help me if I'm going to have an impact. And so I ended up going to Georgetown University for that reason. I transferred in. And I thought I'd go into politics, so it's kind of like the obvious one, right? But the reality is, one thing I noticed there is that a lot of business leaders are the ones behind the scenes sort of kind of calling the shots in DC. That's something I picked up on, noticed. But more importantly, what you got to do is, as a student graduating, you're like 22 or 21, whatever you are, 20. You look out and your projected life is going to be in your 80s or 90s. That's actuarial tables from insurance companies, and they generally don't lose bets. So you're probably going to live about that long, right? So if that's the case, then you should probably think very long term. Politics is very short term, so it's an obvious thing. If I go do this, if I fix it, if I can get Trump in, then he'll get Supreme Court justices, and that's good. And the one good thing about Supreme Court justices is that they last for a lifetime, so that's actually kind of a longer term, almost like hole in our system in a way. But the rest of it's passions check passions. So, you push in and you get Obama. Okay, cool, you win, great. Everybody was so happy in the streets when they got Obama in Cambridge when I was there. But it was like Jesus or something, man. Anyways, then Trump comes in, and it was like, I was in San Francisco when that happened. I actually brought my kids out to the bar because I was like, they're kind of too young for a bar, obviously, but I was like, I got to just see what's going to happen. It's going to be funny. So, because I had to deal with them all like thinking Jesus came in. Now they thought Satan arrived. So, it's neither one of them are Satan or Jesus, right? But they don't, it's very short term, and then, you get Trump, and then maybe you get another reaction later, and it sort of fights back and forth. And it's important, we need to do it. And if we don't have these protections, then they could take our freedoms and stuff, right? But the longer term game is we've got to take position in areas that are going to influence people's hearts and have control over key industries, because those will last, and those will be, and who's running those is going to have a big impact on who ends up in government and who ends up in offices, right? Because they control some of the purse strings. And tech also controls a lot of what you see, and kind of it's slightly biased one way or the other. So it's important to get people of goodwill and enlightened to get in there. And I'm not saying it's like the only thing is we got to get in tech and it's going to save the world. No, but it's absolutely critical. If we don't do it, then we're going to have huge problems and we will not succeed. There's other things too we've got to do as well. Like education stuff. I touched on some of these things. And in education, it's ripe for creative destruction as well. It's got to be rethought how they're doing things a lot. But I'm not going to get into that. And I'm not an expert there, so whatever. But I would say some of these longer-term threads have a bigger, longer-lasting impact. And some of the students should be thinking about that, because they're going to live a long time. Yes, they won't be an immediate ramp up, but if they get in there and they work their tail off, they can rise up within technology and come up towards the top and take over. But it takes vision, that's all.
Thank you. We have time for one final question.
Thank you so much.
It's better be the best question, it's the last one.
I have a question for the entrepreneurs that you said that we need to challenge the big tech companies and to make that market more competitive. What are some of the barriers to entry in that market, and can those be reduced, or should we even reduce them?
Barriers to entry, this country's got so many great things about it, right? We're all tremendously much more wealthy than we realize in this country. That everybody here is, even if you're in the middle income, you're still in the top 5% of incomes of the world. There's 6.7 billion other people out there. But you're already in a great country. I think you've got to have vision for yourself if you want to go into that. And entrepreneurship's not binary, right? You can go into an entrepreneurial company. Our company is entrepreneurial, and it's very difficult. You get in there, it's very, very stressful. Not that I don't do that intentionally. It's that we're pushing so hard, we're moving so fast, it creates a lot of stress, right? So you're not going to have the comfy sort of bureaucratic job and a 9-to-5 type thing, but you will have excitement, and you will see change quickly, and it will compound on itself, and you'll be exercising your creativity a lot more. But so you can channel that entrepreneurial desire to have that oversized impact with your life in a company that's like my company, because, and I'm selling my company to all you guys because I want some Hillsdale people, but there's other companies like this as well. They all suck though. No, but you come into a company like this and you'll be challenged, you're going to grow a lot, and you will have an outsized impact, and you'll be creating something that is new and it's changing and it's going to cause creative destruction where it will supplant other existing companies that are out there. So, or you can go and start your own thing, right? And if you do, either one, you've got to have a vision for yourself that you start at A, and when you're starting, you're not as good, and you're going to get your face kicked in. I mentioned this. I got totally beat up big time in my first few years in business. I mean, I thought I was great the first couple of years, and I got my head handed to me really hard during the crash. Almost went bankrupt, I barely avoided it. But, you know, you just got to have this vision for yourself, and you got to brace yourself mentally that it's going to be, you know, really, really hard, and not like it says in some of those books or people talk about it, oh, it's so cool. You know, these guys, geek guys in like, you know, shorts and whatever, they're doing nothing. I mean, I wear shorts, I wear sandals. You can see me right here, I'm wearing like a t-shirt, right? And this is actually Churchill, so this is a t-shirt we made, that's Churchill on here. So I was happy to see it, and it says Invictus on the bottom, which means unconquerable. But you know, I was happy to see a bunch of Churchill things around here. It kind of confirmed my suspicion that I like Hillsdale a lot. So, but yeah, you've got to have long-term vision for yourself, and you've got to have that mental preparation that you're going to have go through a rough time. It's, you know, learning, the pain of it all, but it's like growth pains, like you're growing in different ways, and if you stick with it, then you will have an outside impact. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.